podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck, and this week, I learned some things that I hadn't known about before because I started doing some research for the topic, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But, as the kids say, I was today years old when I learned of the term Generation Jones. Now, some of you might go, yes, we're waiting for you to figure this out. I've long been kind of perplexed by the terminology that's used with the different generations, insomuch as we have Zennials being some kind of connotation or denoting those who are at the latter end of Generation X, but could very easily kind of go back and forth between Gen X and Millennial, right? Thus, Zennial. But I've also found it odd how so many people that would be considered purely by these arbitrary dates as boomers have many of the same interests, musically, artistically, etc., as Gen Xers. But even from an experiential standpoint, right? So I've mentioned a gajillion times teenage parents, and I was very much around all these people that were born somewhere between 1954 and 1965, which is called Generation Jones. Now, how do they differ than boomers? The earlier boomers were absolutely the children of, potentially, depending on when they started their family, as late as like World War I, but typically World War II. Like their kids were boomers. But some of those that are in this Generation Jones cohort would have had parents that were in Vietnam or Korea. No, Korea. Yeah, Korea. It's got to be Korea, right? Korea was 1950. Let's see. Korean War. The Korean War was fought between 1950 and 1953. So my grandfather on my mom's side was a Korean War veteran. My grandfather on my paternal side was a World War II veteran. And he got started with his family very, very late. He didn't get married till he was like in his 40s. Anyway, but there were some interests when I think about the relatively, short age difference between me and my parents, 18 years. That's within a cohort, right? So when you look at it from the perspective of Gen X in its purest form is considered about a 15-year cohort, whereas the boomers, anywhere from 18 to 20-year cohort. So this 1954 to 1965, when we begin Gen X, is just really interesting. Now, what was the topic that got me thinking about this? I was thinking about how we are, without a doubt, the first true hip-hop generation, right? I maintain that because we've always had it, or for the most part, most of our lives, right? So let's say you're an early Xer. You're born in 65, right? So you're looking at from 1965 to 1979. So you're in your teens when hip-hop first became a thing, which what a sweet time to get introduced to hip-hop, right? It's pretty cool. Got to admit, right? Like you're in your teens. What a great time to have this new form of music. So I knew consciously that the originators, the architects of rap and hip-hop would have had to have been boomers, but saying boomer seemed odd to me. So finding out this Generation Jones is a thing, everything crystallized as far as this group of people who pioneered hip-hop, but ultimately it really became massive with the Gen X artists. So let's kind of give a quick background here. So arguably the first true hip-hop song. Now, some people will say Blondie's Rapture or whatever it is, right? But Sugar Hill Gang is known as like the song. So we're looking at guys like Wonder Mike and Big Bang Hank. They were born in like 57, 56, in that range. You have the Furious Five, Grandmaster Flash, Grandmaster Melly Mel, 1958 and 1961. Interestingly enough, because of some other endeavors in which he was involved in, Ice-T is 1958. That blew my mind. Chuck D from Public Enemy, 1960. Kool Moe D, 1961. But then, think about when rap made that first big leap forward into the mainstream. I don't think it's disputable that that's Run DMC. Right? So Rev Run and DMC were born in 1964. And the late, great Jam Master Jay, one of ours, 1965. Slick Rick, the Ruler, 1965. The Beastie Boys, right? Mike D and MCA, Adam Yauch, the late, great MCA. I think they're 64. And then Ad Rock is 66, firmly Gen X, which also makes sense because he's like with Ione Sky for like a million years. Right? MC Hammer. Interestingly enough, I thought he was going to be closer to like the Beastie Boys in age. But what's interesting is that he got started, had a couple of albums that were like independent, but his whole thing, we'll talk about that in a minute. But he was born in 1962. So again, this Generation Jones. But then you have like this little cohort right here that I call him a cohort, but Vanilla Ice, LL Cool J, Will Smith, for lack of a better term. So, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. 67 and 68, like all those guys are right in that era, right? And that's more of the pop rap, like the big money, big showy, glittery kind of hip hop. Now, here's what blew my mind. NWA, Eazy-E was 1964, right? I'm just using the main guys because there's like three other guys. Dr. Dre, one of ours, 1965. Ice Cube and MC Ren, however, 1969. Like, again, right firmly in Gen X. Like, these are like next level artists. All of Wu-Tang, Gen X. So is Redman. All Gen X. Snoop Dogg, 1971. Eminem, 1972. Go back a little bit for Jay-Z, 1969. Tupac, 71. Biggie, 1972. I mean, these are our peers. And I think it makes perfect sense when you look at it in the bigger context of hip-hop becoming a thing. And I think part of it, too, is that because we've always been exposed to it. Now, I'm sure some of you listening to this hate rap. Some of you probably hate metal. Some of you may only love country. Everyone has their own preferences, if you will. But I think that our generation, having always been around this form of music, and I did the Rap Rock Connection episode, I think it's just, I don't know, inherently part of us. Because it was never foreign or odd. Because we've just always had it. So I think everyone kind of listens to some of it at least, right? I mean, it's pretty impressive to think that 1979 kind of got it all started. But by 1986, think about this. You had major platinum records, right? So this is kind of the time frame, right? So 79, you get your Rapper's Delight. You get guys like Slick Rick, Kool Moe D. Those are like 81, 82, 83. First Run DMC comes out around that time. But 1985, Rick Rubin produces some kid named LL Cool J and his debut record, Radio. So 1985, big hit. But then 1986 ended up being huge. So again, Rick Rubin and his relationship with hip-hop and what he's done for the rap game. 86, you get Raising Hell, Run DMC, and you get License to Ill. Now, Run DMC only sold triple platinum on Raising Hell. That would have been unheard of with some of those earlier artists. Now, Licensed to Ill, kind of retroactively, people went back to look at their catalog, right? Now, it came out of the gate strong, but that is 10 times platinum. 10 times platinum. For an album that some would consider to be in poor taste. By the way, the Beastie Boys agree with that assessment and are very careful about what songs, well, they don't, obviously they're not together anymore after, MCA passed away, but even while he was still alive, they were cautious about what tunes they did from that era, because certainly it is, as they say, cancelable. It's a cancelable record. But of course, they went on to a great, illustrious career. You have DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince with He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper in 1988, triple platinum. And then 1990, MC Hammer's Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em, 10 times platinum. But then, this also blew my mind. The Chronic, Dr. Dre's The Chronic, where we were introduced to Snoop Dogg, only triple platinum. But here is where it gets kind of interesting as far as how much does a record sell posthumously, so after an artist has died. Because check this out. All Eyes on Me by Tupac, 10 times platinum, and Life After Death by Biggie is 11 times platinum. Those were not the sales while those two guys were alive. That is all kind of after the fact. And I think Life After Death, did it come out after Biggie was killed? Let's see. But talk about massive, massive sales. Now we'll talk about it in just a second, but so his discography. So Life After Death was released March 27th, 1997. It was, like 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks after he was killed at the age of 24. So stop and think about that for a second. We're talking about things in the context of Gen X. 24 years old, right? Which would have made Tupac 25 years old. And here we are, right? Like myself, pushing 50, some of you in your 50s. Those same guys today, can you imagine what they might have been able to accomplish? Because we've seen hip-hop go to an even greater level. So here's what's so curious. And I pulled up this article, and I'll pull it up again. If this doesn't tell you, so I do have to check an age here. So let's see here, because I'm curious. Okay, so this is a millennial. Okay. So the industry has also changed, like the music industry has changed. But let's take a look at this. You have the top selling hip hop albums of all time, right? Give me one other second as I do a little bit more research on this, because I find this very interesting too. Because that can't be. Oh no. My mouse has died. Well, that is not helpful. That's what I thought. Okay. I'm just looking at some ages of a couple of people who are on here to make sure that I get them right. Okay. one more. I was really close. I did a pretty good job in my research game tonight. But then these latter era, when I say latter era, I don't mean like when they were released. I just mean that like you think of those early big sellers, those Run DMCs. Now we're looking at like a decade, if not more later on, like getting into the 2000s, right? Okay. So top sellers of all time. Jadakiss, right? This is like they're calling it series of albums, right? So 3 albums. Kiss the Game Goodbye, Kiss of Death, The Last Kiss, 2.43 million. Now, see, this is series. This isn't individual albums. Because people have done way bigger sales. Yeah, they've done, so this is 10 highest selling rap album series. I don't want series. I just want top selling rap albums ever. Just period. Nothing else. Okay, here we go. Let's try this. All right. This makes way more sense. So it's going to give us a little bit more context. Okay? So, Black Eyed Peas. They are Gen X. Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs. 10 million for No Way Out. Right? Gen X. Eminem, Recovery, 10 million, Gen X. Nelly. Zennial? Think he's right on the cusp there. Ha-ha, 1974, my boy. All right, Country Grammar, 10 million. Let's see, Bone Thugs and Harmony, they're all Gen X. Life After Death, Biggie. 10.2 million. License to Ill, 10.5 million. You Have All Eyes on Me, Tupac, 10.6 million. See, this might be a little old because I think Biggie sold more. I think he's at 11 now from the last thing I saw. Tupac's Greatest Hits, 10.6 million. Dr. Dre, 2001. That is 10.6 million. 50 Cent, The Massacre, 11 million. He's also Gen X. Doggy Style, Snoop Dogg, 11 million. Like, there are no, like, Nelly is on here again. Of course, a bunch of M. Oh, yeah. The Outkast, Speakerbox, Love Below, 11 million. They are Gen X. Wow, Big Willie Style by Will Smith, 11.6 million. I didn't think it sold that many records. That was, of course, getting jiggy with it. Get Rich or Die Trying, 50 Cent, 12 million. Eminem, Curtain Call, 12.4. To the Extreme, Vanilla Ice, 15 million. Bonkers. Crazy, Sexy, Cool, TLC. Go buy it. If you don't have it, go get it. 15 million. Just for Creep. That album's damn good. Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Him, MC Hammer, 18 million. Forgot about this record. I think she's 74. You probably know who I'm talking about. But we're talking about Lauryn Hill, 1975. Hell yeah, 20 million. The Score by the Fugees, 22 million. Wyclef Jean, he's definitely in there. Marshall Mathers LP, 25 million. And finally, The Eminem Show, 27 million albums. So I know that music, like I said, has changed. So I'm gonna take a look at an artist here that I'm just curious about sales from a record perspective. Because so many people get things obviously streamed, they count the numbers differently. So everything from, yes, physical copies, but also how they're streamed, whether people are buying them or just paying for their... Basically, you just go ahead and you sign up for your service, your Apple Music, your Spotify, whatever. You do the paid version, and yes, you're paying for the music, but you're really not. So let's see. No kidding. So one of the biggest artists in the world is Drake. Now, Drake is highest seller is 6 million records. 6 million records. So no slouch, don't get me wrong. Really great numbers. But at the same time, you're comparing it against, mind you, Eminem's been around a long time, but 27 million versus 6 for a singular record. That's amazing. Oh, you know what? There's a guy that I forgot to put on the list. Well, not forgot. I mean, we could keep going. We could start talking about Nas, and we could talk about, Cypress Hill, who I've mentioned many, many times before. But 1977 Zone, Kanye West, age 45, right? So his sales numbers, I'm curious. Because again, he is a huge seller, but much of it has come in, a different time frame. Let's see. Kanye West albums. What is his highest selling record here? Yeah, so his biggest seller at 5 million. College Dropout and Late Registration. So those back-to-back records, 04, 05, were at 5 million. Or 5 times platinum. Yeah, I mean, these are low numbers comparatively to some of these massive records that have come out in hip-hop. But even then, got to put them on the list of, Gen X rappers. So some of the other guys that had come up on the list, like I said, Jadakiss, The Game, Ja Rule, I mentioned Nelly, all Gen Xers. One guy who probably considers himself a Zennial, quite frankly, is Lil Wayne, 1982. A lot of big records there. But even then, I bet you his top seller, 3 million, maybe? Probably 3 million. Let's see his discography. Really, the point of all this, though, is that our generation, we are the hip-hop generation. It can't be disputed. Wow, his biggest seller, I was way off. Way off. His top seller, the Carter 3, 8 million. 8 million. Massive numbers. That's massive. Wow, that is impressive. Wow. I didn't think it got up that high. No kidding. That's crazy good. I don't know. I kind of low-key just like Lil Wayne. I don't know what it is. It's just, I like him. I like the way he speaks. I like, when I say I like the way that he speaks, I like how he thinks before he speaks. He always pauses for a second and gives thoughtful answers to things. Now, sometimes he just shoots from the hip, but I've always found him to be measured, and he doesn't necessarily need the clickbait or want the clickbait. He wants to go ahead and present himself authentically, right? But some of the people who featured on that record, by the way, let's see. Busta Rhymes. I didn't even mention Leaders of the New School. 1972. Oh, my gosh. All the Tribe Called Quest. I think Q-Tip might be in that Generation Jones. Let's see. Q-Tip, 1970. Hell yeah. Five Dog, 1970. Ali Shaheed Muhammad, 1970. And Jerobi White, 1971. So, A Tribe Called Quest, so glad to see all of them are Gen X. But it makes sense. So when I was talking about on the rock rap episode, so even though they did a couple of crossover things, I'd mentioned that like the posters that I got from a record store, Strawberries Records and Tapes in Meriden Town Line, I had Tribe Called Quest, I had Cypress Hill, but I also had like Pantera, at the time, let's see, it would have been Pantera. It was probably Metallica. Yeah, pretty sure Metallica was up there. Faith No More was up there. lots of stuff. Nevertheless, that interspersing of both hip hop and rock and metal is so, I think, indicative of our generation. Now, I say that because now our kids, like right now, my daughter's playlist is probably this odd mix. And this is actually, I say odd, only from the perspective that I never quite got into country as much. But I think that this generation, particularly like the Gen Z, I think that's what they are, country is very much in their wheelhouse. And I think part of it is because of how pop it got with artists like Taylor Swift. But like my daughter, I'm sure, is listening to Taylor Swift, Morgan Wallen, but also like Drake, big Drake, like a lot of Drake, a lot of the mumble rappers, you know what I mean? I'm partial to Lil Yachty. If you haven't heard it before, listen to Minnesota. It's so great. It's so awful, but so wonderful all at the same time. But I think our kids, at least the way that I've listened to music, have been exposed to all that. And I think it's so important to listen to all genres of music. And if you think about kind of like the symbiosis, right? So here's where we're going to delve into some of the obvious, I guess, not racial tensions, but you have a gentleman. Oh my gosh, I had his name right there in the tip of my head, in the tip of my brain here, and it's just gone completely out of my head. So I'm going to have to look up his quote. Okay. It'll hit me like right after. Lord Jamar. Oh, why did I not remember that? So anyone who doesn't know, so Lord Jamar, he was part of Brand Nubian, right? So you've heard of Brand Nubian, the rap group, right? So he had a quote that said, "I don't care how good you think Eminem is a guest in the house of hip hop." Now, this divided hip hop culture, in part because if you look at the very earliest days of hip hop and rap, right, you can't dismiss the Beastie Boys as being part of that earliest incarnation of the art form. Like they are some of the grandfathers, the godfathers of rap. I mean, they were there, not interchangeably, but you have Run DMC and the Beastie Boys all coming out of that, you know, Rick Rubin studio out of New York. And you can't just dismiss that. But this is where my point is about the racial piece. I have kids who have always been around people of color. Now, me, I was raised in a city. But part of the reason that we send our kids to the school that we send our kids to is that we know that they're going to be exposed to all different types of people. Internationally, by the way. Yeah, it costs money out of pocket to do it. But the town that we live in is pretty homogenous for the most part. Right? That extends to culture. And the fact that my kids are very comfortable listening to hip hop and country and metal and emo and rock and pop and whatever it is, I think that's how people actually get closer to each other as a human collective, right? Now I'm getting all metaphysical and stuff, right? But I think when people bond over music. So what I was getting at is you look at the symbiosis from a linear evolution of music perspective, right? So you have like the classical artists, right? And how that was very, that kind of led into things like big band, right? It was just a snappier, faster version of an orchestra. Do 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 do, right? The orchestras, right? But then at the same time, you have the spirituals that were coming out of the South, particularly post-slavery, right? That led to the blues. And then the blues, you also have kind of an offshoot because then you have jazz, right? So your jazz and your big band, right? All of these things are coming from different perspectives, right? But they all start adding on to each other, a little bit here and there, right? So then, of course, the bluesmen evolve into the Chuck Berrys and the Little Richards. And through that, you get Elvis. And then you have guys like the Beatles and the Stones who were listening to the blues records coming out of the American South. And then they incorporate that in. And then you get bands like Led Zeppelin who go even deeper into the blues catalog and expand upon it. So then naturally, at some point, dance music comes in. I don't know when that really happened. That'd be a whole topic unto itself. But then out of like the disco scene, right, as we're heading into we've gone from the hippies now into the yuppies. And we're talking about cocaine and then crack and like the inner cities and then the club scene that's there and your Studio 54, all that. So then you get this another offshoot in the dance realm that gives you hip hop, right? So then that is just like the blues was a prototypically black music that then has these early adopters and guys like the Beastie Boys, etc. To then what I mentioned in that episode before, a rock rap connection. Because this has always fascinated me. The guys from Cypress Hill will tell you that they're not necessarily listening to hip hop. Like, I think Be Real says like his favorite artist is The Doors because he considers Jim Morrison a poet. Now, if you're one of those people who thinks that Jim Morrison is a poet, that's fine. If he is a poet, he's a terrible freaking poet. That's my opinion. I denounce Jim Morrison. Just my opinion. Anyway, but he's like, no, dude, this guy's got bars, right? Jim Morrison got bars, and that's what influences them. So all music, all people can be joined by these experiences, this collective that is music. So whether it's rock or it's hip hop or it's whatever you want to call it, I'm just happy that not only do my kids have friend groups that are organically and naturally inclusive. Just they are. And never had to be forced. Like, one of the things about having your kids go to a small private school for elementary school, right, is that you know that all the people, all the families that are there are very much dedicated to education, and in our case, a Catholic school, you know, faith-based, etc., right? So all the kids, regardless of ethnic backgrounds or even religious backgrounds, by the way, they just are friends. And because they're small cohorts, they just naturally become really close. It's such a cool thing. It's such a wonderful thing. Nothing forced, nothing arbitrary, nothing quota-based. It's just, hey, man, we're all friends. And those friendships last. So this past few days, a little bit of a tangent, but my oldest, and this has been hard. Like, I am an old softie, right? So the high school graduate, he just went away from Saturday until today with his buddies. So they went up to Maine, had a great time, right? And one of his best friends, he's known since they were like little bitties. You know what I mean? And they're just like the best of friends. And he is a biracial young man. And that's not even a thing. Now, mind you, the only reason I bring it up, like, well, you're making it a thing, is that like his mom, like legitimately is like the diversity and inclusion director at one of the schools. like making it like that's part of her job. It's part of her training, which she went to school for, right? Because you just need to make sure, you do need to make sure that anything that might cross a line, someone just take an extra thought and say, maybe we don't want to do that. You know what I mean? I'm all for free speech. I'm all about like, you got to treat people with respect. Like minimally. You just want to treat people with respect and not be just completely ignorant culturally. Like, just don't do that. It shouldn't be that hard. It really shouldn't. Particularly if you're like an educator. You probably know that acting out certain skits is probably, and I don't like this word, probably problematic. Because sometimes it just blows my mind. Like, they did what? At what? They did what now? Anyway, that's a little side tangent, little soapbox. I think really the point is, music is a unifier. It really is. And it doesn't need to be forced. You just go to a show, and I remember going to shows where you just talk to someone and you're all there for the same reason, right? Some of the things that happen, like externalities in the world socially, are not true when you think about experientially what people, like regular everyday people, kind of experience. You only hear the very worst things in the news. I stand by it. The news, I don't recommend it. But music, gosh, it's so wonderful. It's so good. And basically, we are, along with Generation Jones, Generation Jones and Gen X, hand in hand, hip-hop, bringing it to the world. It's such a good form of music, you know? And if some of you right now are going, no, dude, I just don't dig it. I'm telling you, like, you just do a little digging. You'll find some really, really good stuff out there. And a lot of just like independent, like even some of the YouTubers, not the mumble rappers. By and large, I'm not really down with it, but like there's a couple of folks out there who are just like freestyling and doing like short form videos and stuff like that that are so good, like really so good. I'm drawing a blank on this one kid. He pops up in my Instagram feed and I'm like, he's got flow and cadence and the wordsmithing, all of it. Just perfect. Perfect. But it really is an art form that comes from our generation. And I think, again, not getting too much into the socio-political commentary, I think it makes sense to some extent as well. Because we've moved out of that like idyllic, you know, we think of that like whole boomer era of the suburbs and all that. But I think about, you know, Ice Cube's character Doughboy in Boys in the Hood, where he says, either they don't know or they don't show, don't care what's going on in the hood. I've mangled that line. But that's what brought NWA to the forefront. That's what brought Public Enemy to the forefront. Run DMC did some occasional commentary, but usually that's like, I'm the king of rock. There is none higher. Sucker MC is going to call me sire, right? Like, that's just like boastful kind of rap. Now, Grandmaster Flash, like the Furious Five, they did social commentary. They did. But then, you know, it just became rock and roll, right? Run DMC first said a DJ could be a band, get you out your seat, get you on your feet, right? Beat is for Eric, BLL as well, hell, Wax is for Anthrax, still they can rock bells, right? So it was later on, it was like NWA, it was Public Enemy that were really starting to push the commentary that gave rise to like the rock rap connection of a Rage Against the Machine, which is trying to draw attention to things that were happening. Now, mind you, you also have like groups like Two Live Crew that had nothing to do with social commentary and just about basically being a debauched rap version of Cheech and Chong, right? NWA had some songs like that as well. No social commentary. right? And obviously a lot of just boastful, like hookers, hoes, drugs, and money kind of thing coming out of NWA as well, whereas Public Enemy was definitely more just on the social commentary thing, right? That was kind of their bread and butter. But they also did some rockin' songs as well. Anyway, tell me, what do you think? Are we the Gen X? Are we the hip-hop generation? I say we are, but maybe you disagree. And what are some artists, just when I'm spitballing here, that I might have missed? Some of you might say, you know, I miss Nas or whatever, you know. Bunch of really great artists that are out there that I couldn't even mention them all. I'm sure there's something glaring that you just go, really? How did you miss that? House of Pain? Can't forget them. I mentioned Cypress Hill. You got the Fushnikins. You got the Far Side. Nine is completely under the radar, but Nine had a great debut record. Really good stuff. But tell me what you think. What am I missing? What are the best hip hop records of all time? Would you agree or disagree that this is music that is for our generation by our generation? Or am I missing something completely? Maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I'm just an old man who doesn't get anything. I'm an old fart. And, yeah, let me know. How do you let me know? You can email me at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at StuckPodX. Head on over to the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Please like, share, comment, leave 5-star reviews, and most importantly, please subscribe to the podcast. So until next time, later, slackers.